Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Bain family. David Cullen Bain was born on March 27, 1972, as the first child of Robin and Margaret Bain, who had married in 1969 when David was 2 years old. Robin decided to become a missionary teacher in Papua New Guinea, so the family moved to Papua New Guinea while living there. The family grew to include 3 more children. David became the oldest sibling, followed by 2 younger sisters, Arawa and Laniet, born 3 years apart, and a younger brother, Stephen, 8 years his junior. During their time in Papua New Guinea, Margaret developed an interest in spiritualism. She began believing in spirits and felt the family needed protection from satanic influences. Over time, Robin's dream of becoming a missionary teacher faded after 14 years. In 1988, the family returned to New Zealand and settled in a large house in Anderson Bay, Dunedin. 3 years later, Robin was appointed headmaster of a small school. However, as promising as this new job sounded, their family still faces many difficulties, and their finances were unstable. By 1994, the relationship between Robin and Margaret had completely broken down. They argued so often that she could no longer bear his presence. She even contemplated the possibility of his death. The family no longer lives normally. The members become cold, and the house is seriously neglected. Over time, the home fell into disrepair, but Robin did nothing to improve it. He was rarely home, spending his weeks living and sleeping in a van near the school on weekends. When he returned, he stayed in another van parked in the yard. The Bain family was deeply dysfunctional. The house was untidy, filthy, and there was no attention to cleanliness. Many people described the house as a pigsty. Robin and Margaret's marriage, like their home, was falling apart. Robin maintained some contact with her children, but the relationship was not particularly close. Later, disturbing allegations would surface, suggesting that Robin had been abusive to his daughter, Laniet. For many years, David has a poor relationship with his father, Robin, but is very attached to his mother, Margaret. In 1994, at the age of 22, he was studying in the music department, aspiring to become an opera singer, although the family faced many difficulties. But all 4 children work or go to school. One of his younger sisters is studying to become a teacher, while his younger brother, Stephen, is still in school. David's education was not easy. He took a few years off from university, but eventually returned to study classical music to make ends meet. He works as a newspaper delivery boy in the morning. There were many problems in the Bain household, and parents should maintain close relationships with each other, as well as with their children. However, in the Bain family, things were different. Each person had their own life and barely communicated with each other. Over time, Margaret became convinced that their troubles stemmed from Robin, whom she believed was possessed by the devil. In her diary, she claimed Robin harbored a demon named Belle. She was so sure of this that she organized an exorcism to exorcise the demon from Robin. Robin's life became miserable. He was forced to live in a camper van and endured Margaret's accusations and rituals whenever he came home. His mental health deteriorated as time went on. He neglected basic hygiene, suffered from severe depression, and seemed to live in a mechanical manner. Colleagues described his behavior as robotic. By June of that year, the family's issues had reached a breaking point, though no one could have predicted the tragic incident that would soon unfold. On the morning of Monday, June 20, 1994, tragedy struck in the Bain household. At 7:09 a.m., David made a frantic call to emergency services and reported that they were all dead, saying he had come home to find his whole family dead. Upon investigation, authorities discovered that Margaret, Arawa, and Laniet were dead in their beds. Stephen was also dead, but his body showed signs of a struggle. Robin was found lying on the living room floor, also dead. David's rifle was found In the same room as Robin's body, a computer was turned on nearby, displaying the message, "Sorry, but David is the only one who deserves to live." When police arrived at the scene, they found a horrific scene, 5 people dead at the outset of the investigation. Police focused on 2 main suspects, Robin and David. Since Robin was deceased, the focus shifted toward unraveling what had truly occurred. The crime scene was staged, make investigators believe that Robin was the killer, as he was found in the living room, holding a rifle nearby. A computer displayed a suicide note believed to be from Robin, implying that he had murdered his entire family. The case, in addition to its tragic nature, is becoming increasingly noteworthy given the length of the rifle and the angle at which the bullet entered Robin's head. It was clear that he could not have harmed himself. In addition, the direction of the blood flow from the wound indicated that his head had been moved immediately after his death. This made investigators suspicious and focused their investigation on another suspect, David. The police began questioning David's actions and statements. If Robin had killed the family, why had David been spared? His account raised further doubts. He said he finished delivering newspapers at 6:40 a.m., and a neighbor confirmed seeing he return home at 6:42 a.m. However, he did not call anyone for help for the next 24 minutes, which raised many questions. When questioned by investigators, David explained that he had fainted from shock and did not know what to do. He also could not provide a reasonable explanation for the fresh wounds on his forehead and knees. In addition, the gun found next to Robin's body belonged to David, making the case even more serious. He admitted he was the only one who knew where the rifle was stored and how to access the safe where it was kept. As suspicions towards David grew, the police arrested him 4 days after the incident, charging him with the murder of his 5 family members. Digital forensics became critical to the investigation, as it was discovered that the computer used to type the note had been turned on at 6:44 a.m. based on witness testimony and David's own account. He returned home at 6:42 a.m., meaning the computer was turned on after his arrival. In the following days, new evidence emerged that proved Robin's innocence. Specifically, there was no blood found on his clothes, including the shoes and socks he was wearing that day. In addition, the rifle did not have his fingerprints. If he harms himself, his fingerprints would have been on the gun. Additionally, no traces of gunpowder were found on him, despite this mounting evidence. Just 17 days after the Bain family murders, relatives decided to burn down the house. They were concerned that teenagers might set fire to the empty house and potentially harm themselves. To prevent this, the relatives took it upon themselves to demolish the house before setting the house on fire. They invited the fire department to supervise. Within minutes, the house was engulfed in bright flames. Visible from a great distance, the smoke lingered in the area for over an hour. A legal expert questioned the legality of the action, doubting whether the legal issues regarding the ownership of the house had been fully resolved. However, David, as the heir and trustee, stated that he never wanted to see the house again. He agreed to demolish it and replace it with something else. As he considered the house to be completely worthless, the investigators could only work with the evidence they already had. Many people believed that the house burned down so quickly that it became strange and suspicious. The question is, why were the relatives allowed to destroy the crime scene? Nearly a year later, in May 1995, David's trial finally began. Prosecutors presented a detailed timeline of incident. They argued that, at 5:00 a.m. on June 20, David woke up to the sound of his alarm clock. After getting dressed, he put on a pair of opera gloves, retrieved his rifle, ammunition from the closet, and used a spare key to unlock the trigger lock. He then murdered Arawa, Laniette, and Stephen. During a violent fight with Stephen, David lost a lens from his glasses and suffered multiple injuries, leaving blood at the scene. After the fight, he put his bloody clothes in the washing machine. started it, and took a shower. Then changing into clean clothes, this left bloodstains in both the laundry room and the bathroom. After cleaning up, he followed his usual routine. He delivered newspapers and returned home at 6:42 a.m. He went upstairs, turned on his computer at 6:44 a.m., typed a message, and waited for his father, Robin, to arrive. Robin typically entered the house to pray at 7:00 a.m., and that day was no exception. David hid behind the living room curtain, waited for Robin to kneel in prayer, then attacked Robin at close range. Finally, he staged the scene to make it appear as if Robin had harmed himself. At 7:09 a.m., he called emergency services, pretending to be distraught, however. In court, David presented a completely different version of events. David claimed he woke up at his usual time, prepared the newspapers, and left the house with his dog. He said he returned home at 6:42 a.m., went to his room to take off his shoes, and then went downstairs to wash his hands and put his clothes in the washing machine. According to David, there was no blood anywhere. When he returned to his bedroom, he noticed bullets on the floor and the lock. Panicking, he searched the house and discovered Margaret, Arawa, Laniette, and Stephen murdered in their bedrooms. He found Robin dead in the living room. David claimed he then fainted for 20 minutes before calling emergency services. David's defense team argued that Robin had killed the family, then turned on the computer, left notes on computer, and ended up harming himself, however. This theory had several inconsistencies. David himself admitted he was the only one who knew where the rifle key was kept. Additionally, he could not explain the injuries he had, or explain the 20 minutes he was unconscious. The prosecution, on the other hand, claimed that he had a financial motive for committing the crime. They argued that he wanted to inherit money and knew that his parents had saved a large sum of money to buy a new house. David Bain was ultimately convicted on all 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. In the following years, the case continued to attract public attention. News of the Bain family tragedy spread rapidly across the country, sparking intense debate, and opinions are divided as to who is really responsible. One person particularly intrigued by the case was former rugby player and celebrity Joe Karam. After retiring from football, he researched and followed the case closely. He believed in David's innocence, and over the years, he visited David in prison more than 200 times. He even wrote 4 books about the case. His thorough research and persistent advocacy put enormous pressure on the judicial system, leading to a decision to appeal to the Privy Council. This appeal, which began in May 2007, came 12 years after David's initial imprisonment. The review of the case revealed significant issues. As the investigation uncovered a major error involving David, this led to the quashing of the conviction and a retrial. The Privy Council in London expressed doubts about David's conviction, especially since new evidence had emerged after the trial that had not been disclosed. For instance, one witness, Dean O'Toole, a friend of David's younger sister, Laniette, claimed that Laniette had once confided in her about experiencing incest with their father. Robin, Dean stated that after hearing this, she went home that weekend and shared the information with her family. This testimony could have shed light on Robin's motives in the case. However, at the original trial, the judge said Dean's account was just hearsay and judged her to be an unreliable witness. Therefore, this information was not presented to the jury. Additionally, other troubling details about Robin surfaced over time. For example, he shared stories of violence and cruelty written by his students on the school newsletter, including one about a family murder in 1995. The jury was not given access to this information, making it impossible for David's defense to use it effectively against Robin. Eventually, David was released on bail while awaiting the retrial. During this time, he stayed with Joe for a few months, then moving to Auckland. For David, this temporary freedom must have felt like a rare luxury, as he still had to appear in court again a year later. In March 2009, the trial resumed. David and all those involved faced the nightmare. Once again, he continued to deny the murders of his 5 family members, and his defense team again insisted that Robin was the one who murdered his family. This time, the defense had more evidence to explain why Robin killed his family. They argued that Robin suffered from severe depression, was frequently anxious when interacting with colleagues and friends, while also facing personal problems. Additionally, Laniette was about to reveal a secret about her incestuous relationship with her father, Robin. This may have affected Robin's mental state. The retrial lasted 3 months, but the jury needed less than a day to reach a unanimous verdict. David was found not guilty on all 5 counts of murder, after spending 13 years in prison and another 2 years being treated as a suspect. David was acquitted and released. However, there are still skeptics who believe he is the killer. On the other hand, there are grounds for suspicion that Robin was the killer. He was very dissatisfied with his life, and if rumors of his unhealthy relationship with his daughter, Laniette, are true, that may have sent him into a state of panic. Several diaries found in Robin's truck, along with disturbing testimony from his co-workers, have painted him as a troubled and unstable individual. This case remains a highly controversial subject, and there are many conflicting opinions. David sought compensation for his wrongful conviction due to the high-profile nature of the case. The New Zealand Justice Minister appointed overseas judges to assess David's claim. The review concluded that he was entitled to compensation for his losses. However, by the time the necessary documents were completed, the Justice Minister had resigned, and his successor disagreed with the terms of the compensation. However, David was eventually compensated for his wrongful imprisonment. In 2016, he received $925 to resolve the matter. During this time, he rebuilt his life. He found a job as an engineer, fell in love, got married, and had a child. He also legally changed his name. There are rumors that the family has since moved to Australia. Meanwhile, a new house has been built on the site where the Bain family home once stood before it burned down. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Mackenzie Sharilla. Mackenzie Sharilla was born in August 2004 in Strongsville, Ohio. The youngest of 3 children, Mackenzie received a lot of love and pampering from her parents, John Sharilla and Natalie Stevens. Her parents prioritized her education and encouraged she to pursue every goal she loved. Being the youngest also gave her a tolerance. She was often forgiven for many of her mischievous pranks during her childhood, and even when she committed some more serious mistakes, she would still be forgiven by her parents. Mackenzie grew up as a spoiled and entitled girl who often got her way. Her parents gave in to her demands, which led her to believe she could act however she wanted without consequence. As a young child, she was kind and friendly, but as she grew older, her behavior and character began to deteriorate. If things didn't go her way, she would throw tantrums, lose her temper, and use bad language. She was prone to physical altercations and would often disregard others. Mackenzie only cared about her own opinions and desires, insisted on getting her way, and prioritized her own interests above all else. During his teenage years, Mackenzie became very difficult and unbearable personality, but her parents never thought it was out of the ordinary. To them, her behavior was a normal part of growing up and a phase she would eventually outgrow. They chose to respond with understanding and patience. However, Mackenzie's behavior worsened over time. In high school, she started using alcohol and occasionally experimenting with illicit drugs, often managing to avoid consequences for her actions. Her reckless behavior not only endangers herself but also the people around her. Mackenzie's parents seemed to be unaware of, or possibly chose to ignore, the obvious issues their daughter was facing. Like many teenagers, she was glued to her smartphone and frequently posted provocative photos and comments on social media. Her actions weren't unusual among her friends, as they often engaged in vandalism, fought, stole, and had run-ins with the police. However, they rarely faced serious consequences, typically receiving only warnings and educational discussions, which may have led them to believe that they could act as they pleased without facing repercussions. Dominic Russo, a young man from Strongsville, was a stark contrast to Mackenzie. Born in September 2001, he was the fourth of 7 children to Frank and Christine Russo. Growing up, Dominic was close to his 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He was an exemplary student, actively participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Throughout his childhood, Dominic excelled academically, participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Despite being part of a large family, Dominic and his siblings never lacked parental love, attention, or care. Frank and Christine Russo were moderately strict but also supportive of their children's interests. As a result, Dominic always had a lot of friends and was accustomed to being the center of attention. His attractive appearance and charming personality made him a popular figure, and he had many admirers from a young age. However, Dominic preferred to focus on meaningful relationships rather than fleeting romances. After completing high school, Dominic attended a local university, specializing in performing arts with a focus on music production. His ambition was to become a renowned music producer, and he was also a skilled singer-songwriter. By the time he was 20, Dominic had established his own business, purchased a car, and was living in a rented apartment in a good neighborhood. Additionally, he excelled as a student and athlete at the university. Dominic first met Mackenzie at a mutual friend's party. This chance encounter turned out to be pivotal for both of them. As complete opposites, they found themselves drawn to each other. Dominic, with his charming and cultured demeanor, quickly caught Mackenzie's eye. He was distinctly different from the people she normally socialized with, possessing qualities that set him apart. He was well-educated, well-mannered, and engaging, able to effortlessly converse on a wide range of topics. Mackenzie had a striking appearance and a slender figure that caught people's attention. She knew how to present herself and often relied on her charm to make an impression. Mackenzie quickly won over the guy she had been interested in, Dominic, and by fall 2021, they started dating. Not long after that, the two introduced each other to their families. While Mackenzie's parents were thrilled with her choice, considering the guy an excellent match for their daughter, Dominic's parents had mixed feelings about Mackenzie. They found her endearing and innocent at first, but there was something about her that immediately raised concerns for Frank and Christine Russo. Those close to Mackenzie believed she had truly fallen in love for the first time, and they hoped this relationship would have a positive impact on her life. Unfortunately, no one could have predicted the tragic endings that would eventually bring their romance to an end. As Mackenzie and Dominic spent more time together, they began to appear in public, holding hands and showing affection for each other. It wasn't long before the entire small town knew about their relationship. While some people who knew Mackenzie well felt sorry for her boyfriend, Dominic, most were simply happy for the couple. As time passed, Dominic started to notice strange behavior in Mackenzie. She was constantly defiant and tried to get everyone to do what she wanted. At first, Dominic thought her behavior was due to her youth and desire for attention. Despite her behavior, the couple made plans for their future, discussing marriage as soon as Mackenzie turned 18. They also hoped to leave their small town and move to a big city, such as New York, where Dominic could pursue a music career and showcase his talent. Over time, Mackenzie's behavior became increasingly alarming and sometimes frightening to Dominic. She asks him to do what she wants, and if he doesn't agree with her, she gets angry and acts very nasty. Dominic initially disregarded Mackenzie's controlling behavior as a joking matter, but then he soon realized her true nature. In public, She maintained a composed exterior, but when they were alone, she took out her anger on him and sometimes attacked him. Dominic felt he couldn't stand his girlfriend any longer and proposed a temporary separation to reconsider their feelings. However, Mackenzie responded by having a very breakdown in front of their mutual friends. She yelled, threatened to harm Dominic if he ended the relationship, and even threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions had the opposite effect of what Mackenzie intended. This makes Dominic even more want to end their toxic relationship. Mackenzie was determined to hold on to her boyfriend, refusing to acknowledge the end of the relationship. Initially, she acted as though nothing was wrong, continuing to call Dominic and invite him to various parties and events. She also posted affectionate photos of the two on social media, express her love for him. However, when Dominic made it clear that the relationship was over, Mackenzie's behavior changed. She became furious and began showing up at his house almost daily, standing under his window and shouting insults and threats. She also resorted to calling him from different phone numbers, leaving messages on his answering machine, and sending emails. In these messages, Mackenzie's tone was inconsistent. Sometimes she will gently express her feelings for him and offer to restart the relationship. However, there are times when she will use insults and threats against Dominic. Dominic was baffled by Mackenzie's behavior, having never experienced anything similar before. He struggled to respond and tried various approaches, including talking to her and ignoring her. He also documented her aggressive outbursts using his phone. The situation became unbearable as Mackenzie would publicly scream at and insult Dominic whenever she saw him, making his life extremely difficult. Despite this, Dominic held on to the hope that with time, Mackenzie would eventually leave him alone and move on. Mackenzie made a shocking statement in front of witnesses, saying it would be easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him move on from her. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, she would make sure no one else could have him. At first, Dominic didn't take her words seriously, but those around him knew she was not joking. Her threats also included hitting and running him over with a car, driving him off a cliff, or stopping on railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train. She described each scenario in detail, as if she had already planned it out. However, Mackenzie soon realized that her threats and insults only pushed Dominic further away. She decided to change her tactics, switching from being aggressive to being sweet and charming again. She stopped pressuring and harassing Dominic and pretended to have learned from her mistakes, wanting to change for the better. She started talking about college plans, asking for his help in choosing a university, and claiming that she had become more focused on her studies, particularly her upcoming final exams. Dominic was pleasantly surprised by the changes in Mackenzie and, still having feelings for her, he decided to help her with her university enrollment. As they started seeing each other again, they gradually rekindled their closeness. Dominic began taking her on dates and spending all his free time with her, thinking she had become more mature and responsible. He fell in love with her again without even realizing it, and their past issues seemed to fade away. This time, they kept their reunion private and didn't tell their friends and acquaintances about it. Therefore, their dates are private and discreet, allowing them to enjoy their time together without seeking outside attention. When Dominic's brother Angelo found out, he warned that nothing good would come of it. But Dominic didn't listen because he loved her too much, so he didn't pay attention to his brother's words. Dominic thinks that Mackenzie has changed positively after they reunited, but he had no idea what she was really planning. Unbeknownst to him, Mackenzie had devised a sinister plan to exact revenge on him. She became obsessed with the idea of a disastrous car accident. She would spend her free time traveling around the city and looking for the perfect place to carry out her plan. Mackenzie considered crashing into a steep cliff or stepping in front of the train, but she couldn't find cliff nearby and thought the idea of blocking the train was untrustworthy. One day, while driving through an industrial area, she stumbled upon a secluded spot with no cameras or traffic. A massive brick wall caught her attention, and her twisted imagination quickly conjured up a new and equally horrific plan. She decided that accelerating to top speed and crashing into the wall would be just as spectacular as the other ideas she had considered. Initially, Mackenzie had planned to end her life alongside her lover, Dominic, intending for their tragic story to become a cautionary tale for the entire city. She had confided in her best friend about this plan, but her friend thought she was joking because she had had such wild ideas before. In late July 2022, just days before Mackenzie's 18th birthday, she asked Dominic if he wanted to attend a mutual friend's party with her. She told him that it would be the perfect opportunity for them to have some fun, relax, and make it clear to everyone that they were back together and deeply in love. Dominic quickly agreed, as he still trusted Mackenzie and didn't question her feelings or intentions. On the night of July 30th, Dominic and Mackenzie arriving at the party holding hands. Their entrance caught everyone's attention, and they looked happy and in love as they openly displayed their affection for each other. Their friends were genuinely thrilled to see them reunited but notice how well-suited the couple was. When night fell, Dominic and Mackenzie freely took photos, kissed and enjoyed their time together without any hesitation. However, no one had any idea that this joyful celebration would take a devastating turn. Dominic and Mackenzie drank some alcohol, like other people at that party, but Mackenzie secretly took a dose of illegal drugs, for courage, to not change her mind at the last minute and slammed on the brakes. The next morning, Dominic and Mackenzie bid farewell to the guests and began to head out to their car. However, they were approached by a friend of the guy, Davion Flanagan, who requested a ride home in their vehicle. Mackenzie tried to decline request, said that they had made other plans, but Dominic didn't see any problem with driving his friend home. Mackenzie eventually relented, and she agreed to give Davion a ride home. Mackenzie took the driver's seat, with Dominic beside her and Davion behind him. They left the party venue and headed onto the main road. Mackenzie drove cautiously, adhering to the speed limit and avoiding drawing attention to themselves. When they approached an empty intersection, she stopped at the red light. As they waited, Davion dozed off, allowing her to reconsider her intentions. In her later statement, Mackenzie claimed she had planned to die in an accident, but her words were discredited by the fact that she had buckled her seatbelt during the previous stop, while Davion remained unbuckled. As the light turned green, Mackenzie suddenly accelerated and took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road that led into an industrial area. Dominic and Davion seemed unaware of what was happening, and the car sped up as if Mackenzie had lost control. Pressing hard on the gas pedal, she careened the vehicle toward a brick wall. Luckily, a witness happened to be in the area. On an early Sunday morning, the industrial area was deserted, with no other people around to see the accident or offer assistance. However, a woman who lived near the scene heard the crash and went outside to find out what's happening. Seeing smoke and realizing a car had crashed, she quickly returned to her home to call for emergency help. About 30 minutes after the accident, medics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, Davion and Dominic in the car succumbed to their injuries and died instantly. Mackenzie, however, was fortunate to have survived thanks to her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie, the driver, was unconscious and trapped in the wreckage with severe leg injuries, but she was breathing and had a palpable pulse, giving hope that she will survive. During the process of being freed from the car, Mackenzie briefly regained consciousness but she appeared disoriented and unaware of her surroundings. Once released from the vehicle, she was immediately rushed to the hospital for treatment. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed Mackenzie with multiple fractures and viscera injuries. Blood tests also revealed that she had been under the influence of both alcohol and drugs at the time of the accident. The police initially received leads and a confession in the investigation. After learning the results of Mackenzie's tests, it was thought that she was under the influence of addictive substances and didn't understand her actions. It's possible she tried to drive through the wall or didn't notice any obstacles, as there was no sign of braking. Since Mackenzie was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation, the police couldn't question her at first. When she regained consciousness, she became hysterical and confessed to the doctor, saying she deliberately crashed into the wall to kill Dominic and initially intended to die with him. Mackenzie also said that Dave was an unintended victim because he was hitchhiking in their car. Doctors dismissed Mackenzie's confession, believing it was a delusional state caused by anesthesia, painkillers, and grief over her boyfriend's death. However, when the police spoke with Mackenzie, her story changed completely. This time, Mackenzie said she remembered almost nothing about the incident of that night due to consuming alcohol and using illegal substances. Mackenzie claimed she had a memory lapse after getting in the car and had no idea how Davion ended up in the car. However, evidence contradicted this. Surveillance footage tracked the car's initial route and showed Mackenzie driving cautiously and following the rules until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial area. Furthermore, it was discovered that Mackenzie had previously driven the entire route days earlier, and her car had been spotted by multiple witnesses. After being discharged from the hospital, Mackenzie quickly recovered and attempted to resume her disinterested life. She showed no remorse for her actions and was confident about evading consequences. She became active on social media again, met with friends, and made future plans. By September, she even attended a concert in a nearby city, featuring her favorite band, seemed unaffected by her boyfriend's passing. Mackenzie lived an active life despite having her legs in a fragile state. She would often appear at concerts in a wheelchair, wearing vibrant makeup and taking selfies to share on social media. Just a month after recovering, Mackenzie attended a Halloween party in a pre-made costume where she met new people and enjoyed herself. However, her life has changed completely on November 4, 2022, when she was taken into custody. The investigation gathered enough evidence to bring the case to trial. Mackenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession of a controlled substance found in her pocket and detected in her blood. However, during the trial, Mackenzie changed her testimony multiple times. Initially, she claimed to have memory loss, but when her friend testified against her, revealing her plan, she shifted her defense. Mackenzie then claimed she had intended to die alongside her lover, but this was disproven when it was discovered she had secured herself with a seatbelt. Mackenzie Sherrill was found guilty of all charges on August 21, 2023. However, due to her age at the time of the crime, just 5 days shy of her 18th birthday, the court took this into consideration and tried her as a minor. Under state law, Mackenzie was eligible for consecutive 15-year prison sentences without parole for each murder she committed. However, due to her young age, the court decided to let her serve these sentences simultaneously. This meant she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By that time, Mackenzie would be 33 years old. Both the prosecution and defense expressed displeasure with the court's decision. Dominic family members felt the sentence was too lenient, and they intended to appeal for a stricter punishment. On the other hand, Mackenzie's parents and lawyer believed the sentence was too harsh and decided to appeal as well. The judge refused to change the sentence, questioning whether Mackenzie would be released after 15 years in prison. In his opinion, Mackenzie showed no remorse for her actions and displayed arrogance towards the court. The extended prison term would provide her with ample time to reflect on the gravity of her crimes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of McDermott family. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. But we know that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. Known family members include his father, Bruce McDermott, and two sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest. According to those close to him, Mark was not only a successful businessman but also a kind and easygoing person. Nicole described her brother as a wonderful person who avoided causing harm to others. Information about Mark's life is limited, especially regarding his adult life. However, we do know for sure that he traveled to the southern United States, although the reasons and circumstances are unclear. It was there that he met Johanna Dunn, a single mother raising a 4-year-old son, Donald Dunn. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia and lived there with his mother's family all his life. His grandparents played a major role in Donald's early upbringing, as they cared for him most of the time. Donald's mother, Johanna, was a single working mother who found raising a child difficult, so she asked her grandparents to help. On the rare occasions when Johanna and Donald were home together, she would often entertain him with video games or television. This reflected Johanna's difficulty in giving her son her full attention, although they tried to make time for each other. Their lives changed when Mark came along. Johanna and Mark quickly fell in love and married. Johanna took her husband's last name, and the three of them moved to West Virginia, becoming a happy family. From the beginning, Mark and Donald were very close, as if they were related by blood. Their relatives, including Mark's sister and father, confirmed that Mark treated Donald like his own son, and Donald also considered Mark his only father. The relationship between Donald and Mark was very close, which was evident when Donald was young. During the difficult times when Mark and Johanna were temporarily separated, Donald was still determined to stay with Mark instead of his mother. At the same time, the family faced a great challenge when Johanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, thanks to their support and solidarity, they overcame these difficulties together. Mark always took good care of his stepson, ensuring that Donald had a comfortable and fulfilling life. Although Donald is a simple man and does not ask for much, he is very grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather has created for him. When Donald graduated from high school in 2008, Mark covered the entire cost of his college education. Donald attended Rio Salado College for the first 2 years, then transferred to Marshall University in 2010. Throughout this time, Mark continued to financially support Donald's education. Donald lives with his girlfriend and her family. He and his girlfriend have been in love since they were 15 years old. Despite this, Mark and Johanna have always been very supportive of Donald. They not only pay for Donald's tuition but also support him financially in many other ways. Specifically, they cover the costs of Donald's clothes, car insurance, daily living expenses, and food. Donald dedicates all his time and effort to studying. As a responsible and diligent student, he always strictly follows his daily study schedule. He often refuses or cancels plans to meet friends and relatives, citing the need to complete assignments or study for exams. Donald prioritizes studying above everything else in his life. During his 5 years in college, he always tried his best to graduate on time and not fall behind in any semester. May 25, 2013, a Saturday, was supposed to be the big day when he received his university diploma. However, instead of being the joyous occasion he had planned, the day turned into a heartbreaking moment that would change his life forever. While the McDermott family was preparing for Donald's graduation, an emergency call was placed from their home to 911. Johanna called the police and admitted that she had shot her husband. She insisted that the act was intentional, not an accident. Police quickly arrived at the McDermott family home. Sergeant Greg Kean of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive. When he got to the scene, he noticed that Johanna appeared to be in a state of severe shock. As he entered the home, he found Mark lying motionless on the couch in the living room. He appeared to have been reading a book when he died. Initially, Sergeant Gregg noticed that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. However, when investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound behind the shoulder. The medical examiner at the scene confirmed that the cause of death was head injuries, but it was possible that Mark did not die immediately after being shot. There was a lot of blood at the crime scene, suggesting that Mark had been losing blood over time before his death. According to initial reports, Donald was taking a shower to prepare for his important day. The sound of the running water from the shower drowned out the gunshots. So Donald did not hear Johanna shoot her stepfather. It was only when Donald emerged from the shower that he discovered Mark's body in the living room. On the dining room table was a pistol and a letter, presumably written by Johanna to Donald's son. In the letter, Johanna expressed her grief and explained that her marriage had become unbearable. She could no longer live with a man she did not love anymore. Johanna also apologized for leaving Donald's life when he was still a minor. At that time, Johanna and Donald were taken to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office in a private car, where a police officer took their statements. Since Johanna was the one who called the police, the incident was initially treated as a serious case of domestic violence. In the call to the dispatcher, Johanna stated that after an argument with Mark, she had shot him in the head with a pistol in a fit of rage without realizing what she was doing. However, she later changed her story, denying what she had said before. This caught the police by surprise and forced them to adjust the entire investigation. After getting into the police car, Johanna suddenly revealed the truth that it was not her, but her son Donald who killed Mark. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story was actually much more complicated than what the investigators initially thought. Johanna entered the interrogation room and met with Captain James Barr from the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office. She detailed the events that had occurred on May 25, 2013. According to Johanna, her son was scheduled to attend his graduation that morning. Before that, she had gone out to run some errands and buy groceries. Johanna had just arrived home and was about to get out of the car when Donald approached her. He asked his mother to close her eyes and follow him into the house, saying that there was a surprise. Trusting her son, Johanna complied and walked into the dining room. Donald told his mother to sit down. Suddenly, Johanna heard a distinct clicking sound. When she opened her eyes to look at her son, she was horrified to see Donald pointing his own pistol at her. The gun failed to fire, and Johanna panicked, trying to wrestle it from her son. She tried to calm down, think clearly, and make a plan to save herself from becoming Donald's victim. Seeing Mark's body, she quickly told her son that she would call 911 and take the blame for him. Although Donald was initially skeptical, he eventually agreed to his mother's plan. During her interrogation, Johanna explained why she called 911 and incriminated herself. She did so to protect herself from Donald, even though she knew she would go to jail. She believed that if she did not, Donald would kill her. Johanna expressed shock that her son would point the gun at her head and pull the trigger, something she never thought would happen in her 23 years of being a mother. The gun belonged to her. She explained that the reason the gun did not fire was probably because Donald had pulled the trigger of the semi-automatic gun too far, preventing it from firing normally. Captain James thought Johanna's story was very plausible. From the moment he met Donald, he felt something was wrong. He noticed that Donald, a 23-year-old young man, was too calm for this serious situation. His face always remained neutral, showing no emotion. Therefore, he decided to put him in a separate interrogation room, away from his mother. From the beginning of the interrogation, Donald denied any involvement in his stepfather's death. However, after being informed of Johanna's testimony, his denial quickly collapsed. James did not need to use any threats or pressure to force Donald to confess. Instead, he voluntarily recounted the whole incident, revealing every detail of the case. The story Donald told was almost unbelievable. This story begins after Donald completed his first year of college. It was clear that his academic performance was not good, and due to his low grades, he decided to drop out of school. Donald shared that at first, his courses were easy and he could get good grades just by showing up to class on time. As the semester progressed, he encountered more and more difficulties in his studies. He felt that he was not capable of continuing. Instead of admitting the truth, he decided to lie to Mark and Johanna. Not only were his close friends deceived, but his girlfriend and her family were also unaware of his true situation. According to Rachel Rush, Donald's girlfriend's sister, he created a false impression that he was studying. Donald maintained a student-like schedule, leaving and returning home at fixed times. He spent most of the day in his room and asked not to be disturbed, citing the need to focus on homework or studying for exams. To create a more convincing appearance, Donald even falsified his transcripts. This was a deliberate deception that lasted for 4.5 years. No one in Donald's life realized that he was lying to them. Donald's family trusted him completely during the time he pretended to be a student. Johanna and Mark had no idea that their son had abused the financial and emotional support they had given him all this time. Donald admitted that he had no intention of deceiving his family at first, but as time went on, it became more and more difficult to confess the truth. The main reason he could not tell the truth was because he was afraid that Mark and Johanna would stop paying for all his expenses. Although he appeared to not care much about material things like cars or expensive clothes, he did not want to give up his current lifestyle. He was well aware that he would lose a lot if his parents found out the truth. For a long time, Donald had been meticulously planning to escape all trouble. From the beginning, he had planned to kill his parents to avoid suspicion. Donald planned to leave a note similar to the one found on the dining table along with the pistol. He believed that when the police read the note, they would conclude that this was the crime of an unhappy woman who saw no other way but to kill herself. Donald told Captain James that on May 25th, he had secretly taken Johanna's pistol and kept it with him all day, pretending to be preparing for his graduation ceremony. Before carrying out the rest of his plan, he decided to go to the supermarket to have his image recorded by the surveillance cameras, in order to use this evidence to prove his innocence. Before the murder, Donald had begun to show an interest in shooting practice. Although his best friend Alex Willis found this strange, Alex did not suspect anything as he did not think Donald would want to use a gun to attack someone. Donald's considerations and conclusions left everyone who heard them afterwards confused. James shared that this young man admitted that he had even planned the emotions he would express on his face when the police arrived at the scene. He also thought about how he would support himself after losing the steady income provided by Mark, and decided to take advantage of the sympathy of his loved ones as long as he could. While his family supported him, he decided to take up sports to improve his health and fitness. If he had no other choice, he would consider joining the police force or the army. When considering the possibility of his plan succeeding, Donald realized that it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to admit that he had been lying to them for nearly 5 years. In April 2016, the West Virginia Supreme Court released a legal opinion. According to the opinion, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder 1 month after his arrest in June 2013. Even before the trial, Donald and his legal team sought to delay the trial. A few weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, the defendant, Donald Dunn, who had been held in solitary confinement, underwent surgery on his right hand. His attorneys used the surgery as a reason to request a delay, arguing that during the initial hearings, he would be under the influence of strong painkillers. To decide this issue, the court first requested his medical records. However, this request was denied on the grounds that, at the preliminary hearing, there was no evidence that Donald was partially incapacitated due to the use of painkillers. Therefore, the court determined that he was competent to attend trial and approved the continuation of the scheduled trial. The trial took place in August 2014, over a year after Mark's death. It was presided over by Judge John Hutchinson, with David White representing Donald and Christine Keller from the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's two sisters, along with one of their nieces, traveled more than 15,000 kilometers from Australia to attend the trial of the man they had considered a family member for nearly 20 years. Although there were no details from witness testimony or evidence presented to the jury, and no photographs or video footage, the defense wanted to include in their opening argument that Donald was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time of the crime. However, there was no evidence that this had ever been mentioned before or confirmed by any toxicology tests. On August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was convicted of the murder of his stepfather, Mark McDermott, the attempted murder of his mother, Johanna McDermott, and the use of a firearm. About a month later, on September 5 of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald Dunn to life in prison without parole for the murder of his stepfather and 15 years in prison for the attempted murder of his mother. After the verdict was announced, Johanna read an emotional letter to the court. In the letter, Donald's mother mentioned that something unfortunate had happened in her son's life. This could have been due to the decline in health of his grandparents, the pressure she put on him to go to college, or his exposure to violent video games at a very young age. She expressed her disapproval of the way her son was perceived by the public and stated that she did not agree with his sentence. However, Judge John explained that Johanna's objections did not affect his decision. He felt that the sentence he imposed was the only way to restore justice in an unjust situation. He sympathized with the defendant's mother, who, despite the circumstances, wanted to protect her son from the consequences of his actions. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father still could not understand how Donald could take the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalie Connolly. Natalie Connolly is a beautiful and charming woman who has a stunning appearance identical to her twin sister. Her sister is equally beautiful, and they share a close bond not only because of their similar appearance but also because of their deep connection. Natalie has a special ability to bring joy to those around her. She can easily make people laugh and chat with anyone she meets. Despite facing the challenges of being a single mother, Natalie always strives to ensure that her daughter, Madison, does not lack anything. Her care and love for Madison are evident in her constant presence and attention. In a crowded bar, Natalie meets John, a charming and elegant man. They are attracted to each other from the beginning, and their relationship gradually blossoms. John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. They exchange contact information and begin to delve deeper into their relationship. As Natalie spends more time with John, she feels an irresistible attraction to him. This was evident from the moment they first met, even though she had no idea of his profession or wealth at the time. As they grow closer, John reveals that he is a millionaire. His wealth is displayed through lavish gifts and fancy dinners at top restaurants. Natalie is fascinated by John's gentlemanly and elegant style, as well as his lavish mansion. However, behind John's charming exterior, there is much more mystery. His life is far more complicated than he lets on. While engaged to a pregnant partner and expecting a second child, John hides the existence of 3 other children. His relationship with Natalie is actually an affair, which continues even as John deals with the breakup of his previous relationship. Eventually, John chooses to turn his attention to Natalie. Their romance seems like a fairy tale from the start. John and Madison become close quickly, and Natalie soon wins the hearts of John's children. John treats Natalie to lavish and romantic experiences, from spa trips to hiring a chauffeur. It seems like he is making all her dreams come true. However, when Natalie moves in with John in Kinver, Stafford, England, the truth slowly emerges. Their relationship, initially fueled by passion, reveals its true nature once they live under the same roof. As they spend every waking moment together, they begin to understand each other better. However, John's interests start to annoy her. He enjoys intimate interactions and often leaves bruises and scratches. Romantic gestures and lavish dinners lose their appeal as Natalie realizes that she has to pay a high price for all of them. Natalie once thought her relationship with John was a fairy tale, but now she realizes the harsh truth behind it. Fearing abandonment, she still accepts John's demands during their intense sexual encounters. She recalls how John abandoned his pregnant ex-fiancée and fears the same thing will happen to her. Despite this, Natalie still feels fulfilled in the relationship and does not want to leave because she fears returning to her old monotonous life. She seeks comfort and guidance from her sister and mother, sharing the bruises and scratches John leaves during their intense sexual encounters. She admits that John enjoys causing her pain. Natalie faces a difficult situation as her relationship with John brings her happiness but also has negative aspects. She is caught in a dilemma of wanting to maintain her luxurious lifestyle with John while being dissatisfied with the intimate aspect of the relationship. The tension between them increases as they both seek out other relationships. As John continues to chat with other women, Natalie also begins texting other men without John's knowledge. When John discovers these exchanges, he becomes very angry. Although John makes no secret of his interactions with other women, he strongly objects to Natalie interacting with other men, highlighting the unfairness of their relationship. Despite John's attempts to hide his insecurities, he invites Natalie out for a casual evening on December 18, 2016, which includes drinks, football, and dinner. John forces Natalie to drink heavily and even offers her cocaine, albeit in smaller amounts than he consumes. This was not the first time he had created such a situation, suggesting a pattern of behavior intended to make Natalie more comfortable before committing bad acts on her when they were home alone. This raises the question of whether Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions was an attempt to dull the pain she knew she would endure behind closed doors with him. John wanted to be in complete control of the situation, ensuring he could carry out his intentions towards Natalie without being hindered. Therefore, he carefully controlled his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a mild state of intoxication that did not affect his performance during their sexual encounters. After what seemed like a pleasant day out, ending with a satisfying meal at one of their favorite places, John arranged for a driver to take them home. However, beneath the normal appearance, John's evil intentions were hidden. That day, Natalie was in a drunken state, which only worsened as dinner failed to sober her up or absorb the alcohol. She was disoriented, stumbling out of the car as they arrived home, accidentally leaving her phone behind. Instead of letting Natalie recover from her drunkenness, John had other intentions. He returned to retrieve Natalie's phone, but it is unclear whether he had seen her messages. Natalie became the victim of John's cruel actions as he attempted to inflict maximum harm on her. He attacked her in various ways, including punching, kicking, stomping, and the disgusting act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, John used a bottle of carpet cleaner, using its nozzle as a weapon. After the attack, he left Natalie naked and bloody at the bottom of the stairs, her dress pulled up around her waist, leaving her to suffer from her injuries. Natalie lay motionless in a pool of blood when John left the bed. A few hours later, when he awoke, he discovered that Natalie had died from the severe injuries she had sustained, totaling 40. John's subsequent actions, including his nonchalant call to emergency services, revealed his twisted mentality. He showed no emotion or remorse when he informed the paramedics of his futile attempts at CPR and referred to Natalie's unresponsive state with indifference. As the paramedics loaded Natalie's body into the ambulance, John remained silent and emotionless, observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was pronounced dead, John was arrested. To justify his cruel actions, John made the excuse that the rough sex had gone too far and claimed his innocence. He alleged that Natalie had consented to the rough actions, claiming that she had initiated them and that she had been the one who desired all these brutal actions. According to John, Natalie allegedly requested rough sex, including being injured, beaten, and even having a bottle of carpet cleaner inserted into her. John claimed that, despite bleeding and in pain, Natalie allegedly reassured him that she was safe and wanted to continue. However, John's account is not credible. He attempted to deflect blame by saying that Natalie had agreed to engage in rough sex and that they had engaged in similar acts many times without issue. When asked about leaving Natalie partially clothed at the bottom of the stairs, John offered a weak excuse, claiming it was a regular occurrence and that he had never provided a blanket because the house was always warm. Throughout the proceedings, John showed no remorse or regret for his actions. Instead, he placed the blame squarely on Natalie. His attempts to shift the blame left onlookers frustrated. Despite being convicted of manslaughter, John received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, but only served 22 months before being released. Natalie Connolly's case sparked widespread criticism and controversy, leading Fiona McKenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. The movement aims to promote discussion about sexual assault and calls for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, the defense minimizes and legitimizes violence in intimate relationships, perpetuates harmful stereotypes, and devalues the experiences of survivors. However, in interviews, Fiona has been surprised that some people, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, have accepted it. The reason for this acceptance is that they believe the incident was isolated, not a systemic problem. However, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, with survivors being held responsible for the risks that may have resulted from their behavior. Such attitudes highlight the need for continued advocacy and education to challenge harmful beliefs and support survivors of sexual violence. The Domestic Violence Bill was passed by Parliament on July 6, 2020, and following royal assent on April 29, 2021, it became law and is known as the Domestic Violence Act 2021. This marks a significant step forward in combating domestic violence and preventing perpetrators from using harmful excuses to justify their actions. Natalie's loss has left a deep void in the lives of her family and friends. They are still grappling with the pain of her loss. However, their unwavering love and support for Natalie is a testament to her strong and resilient spirit. The community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and support survivors on their journeys to healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion are an inspiration and hope to those struggling. Although Natalie Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Her story will hopefully inspire us to come together to fight domestic violence and support those in need. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Roman family. Jean-Claude Roman was born on February 11, 1954 in Laas, France, and grew up in Claques, Jura. He received his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at Lycée du Parc in Lyon but dropped out after 1 semester. He then enrolled in medical school. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956. She pursued a medical degree at the University of Lyon, where she met Jean-Claude Roman, a distant cousin of her family. Initially, they didn't have a strong connection and barely spent time together. However, through mutual friends and study sessions, they gradually grew closer. Jean-Claude was attracted to Florence and he made an effort to win her over. In return, Florence considered him an ordinary person, not particularly outstanding. Her ideal partner was someone who combined the typical qualities of a doctor: intelligent, charming, and attractive. After failing her second exam, Florence decided to switch from medicine to pharmacy. Jean-Claude and her friend Luc Ladmiral also supported her decision. The three of them maintained the habit of studying, taking exams and supporting each other for a long time, finally graduating in 1980. Florence and Jean-Claude then married, and 6 years later they welcomed their first daughter, Caroline. 2 years later they had a son, Antoine, after Caroline was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother, working part-time locally to support her family. Her husband, Jean-Claude Raman, worked for the World Health Organization in Geneva, near their home in France. In late December 1992, Florence was out running errands in Fère, France. Her children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, and Jean-Claude was at work in Geneva. It was a normal day, with Florence still thinking about their recent Christmas celebrations. While she was out, she met the school principal. They exchanged holiday greetings and began discussing their Christmas experiences. The conversation eventually turned to an incident involving Florence's husband. The principal mentioned that the principal had been demoted due to an affair with a teacher, which led to a school board meeting. Her husband, Jean-Claude, also served on the school board, so the principal wanted to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, so the principal's secretary tried to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, since Jean-Claude worked there. However, Jean-Claude's name was not found, which the principal found strange. Florence laughed it off, but she was also curious. Florence assured the principal that there must be a good reason why Jean-Claude's name and phone number were not listed, and she promised to raise the matter with Jean-Claude when he got home from work. Jean-Claude and his acquaintances have lost touch. He keeps his professional life private, sharing very little with family and friends. His wife, Florence, believes he is a respected researcher in the medical field, but she knows little about his work, and Florence does not even have his office phone number. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she would page him, and he would call her back as soon as possible. When friends asked Florence about Jean-Claude's role at the World Health Organization, WHO, she would laugh and admit that she wasn't sure. Sometimes, she would jokingly speculate that he might be a secret spy. In 1992, Florence discovered that the WHO hosted an annual Christmas tree event, where staff members could bring their families to decorate a tree together. What surprised her was that Jean-Claude had never mentioned this event to her. Florence was deeply disturbed by the recent events surrounding her husband. First, the school president revealed that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory, despite his claims of working there. Then, she discovered that a significant family event had taken place at his workplace over a decade ago, which he had never mentioned to her. These discoveries likely weighed heavily on Florence's mind. However, during the holiday season, Florence's brother visited the family and noticed a profound sadness surrounding Florence. As the new year, 1993, began, Florence and Jean-Claude spent time together, going shopping. During their outing, Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy himself a new suit. On January 5th, Jean-Claude withdrew a total of 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. He then gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met before going to a gun store. At the gun store, Jean-Claude purchased tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. Jean-Claude returned home, however, on January 11th at 4 a.m., a frantic call was made to the fire brigade, reporting a fire at the house. Garbage collectors on their early morning rounds discovered the house on fire and immediately alerted the fire brigade. The firefighters rushed to the scene and began extinguishing the flames. While they were working, they noticed someone moving in the upstairs bedroom window, indicating that the person was seeking help. Medical personnel were called, and the person, who was Jean-Claude, was rescued from the burning house. After being rescued, Jean-Claude was found unresponsive and in shock. Paramedics immediately attended to him, and he was taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. The fire was quickly extinguished, allowing first responders to enter the premises. A family friend, Dr. Luke Ladmiral, was called to the scene and was met with the devastating sight of the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence being carried out on stretchers. When a household fire results in fatalities, the police typically launch an investigation to determine the cause of the fire and rule out any potential criminal activity. In this case, due to the significant loss of a prominent doctor's family, law enforcement authorities began an investigation into the tragic fire at the Roman residence. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team found evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull, which raised suspicions and sparked an investigation. Further examination revealed that Florence did not die from the fire, but from the blunt force trauma. The examination of the children also yielded a disturbing discovery. Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, but were shot hours before the fire started. This new information indicates that the cause of death occurred before the house caught fire. As a result, the police have opened an investigation into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, Jean-Claude is in a coma and unable to provide any information, so the police have to look for other leads. Florence's home became a crime scene and police began interviewing relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors to find out what had happened to the family. As part of the investigation, police also contacted Luke Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being taken from the scene. Luke had no idea what was going on, and Luke had no clue who the Florence family had enemies when asked by the police. Luke still couldn't think of anyone who might want to harm them. However, Luke was asked to come in for questioning again a few days later. During this questioning, the police asked Luke about the family's relationships and any recent events that might have led to the fire. After a thorough questioning, the police still couldn't find any reason to believe that the family had any enemies or that anything unusual had happened before the fire. The investigation then turned to Jean-Claude, and what they discovered was horrifying. Jean-Claude had never actually worked for the World Health Organization, nor had he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he wasn't even a qualified doctor. Luke is initially skeptical, but as he thinks back to his time studying with Jean-Claude, he begins to realize that something is wrong. Luke recalls a specific incident from his second year when Jean-Claude was absent from an exam, and Luke visited Jean-Claude at home and found him unwell, with clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude confided in Luke that he was battling lymphoma, a cancer that had been under control but worsened by the stress of the exam. Luke promised to keep this a secret, especially from Florence, as Jean-Claude had asked him to. The police were unable to obtain any significant information from Luke, so they decided to wait for the results of the forensic tests on the victims. The police noticed several unusual things about the house. All the doors were locked from the inside, indicating that no one had broken in. At first, the main theory was that the fire was an accident. However, the condition of the bodies made them consider other possibilities. The findings pointed to a more complex and sinister scenario, therefore, it was necessary to interrogate Jean-Claude. Since Jean-Claude had been in a coma for several weeks, the police made him their prime suspect and conducted a full investigation during that time. After verifying with the university, it was found that Jean-Claude had spent 12 years studying, passing his first-year exams but failing those in the second year. Since there were no restrictions on re-enrollment, Jean-Claude kept signing up for the second year, attending classes and studying medical texts for over a decade. What was puzzling was that he never managed to pass the second-year exam. Jean-Claude's uncle went to his parents' house to break the tragic news. When Jean-Claude's uncle entered the house, he found the bodies of Jean-Claude's mother and father dead, both shot with the same gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. An autopsy confirmed that the gun was the same, and the estimated time of death suggested that the murders were related. The situation becomes even more mysterious after the tragedies become public. The police receive an anonymous call from a woman. She is reluctant to get involved in the investigation but has important information to share. She reveals that she had a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She was also told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization. The woman was misled into believing that Jean-Claude was involved in and funding major research projects. He also presented himself as having a significant position in Geneva's banks, making them seem very attractive. Jean-Claude convinced her to invest in a Swiss bank by offering an unusually high 18% interest rate. The woman eventually agreed to give Jean-Claude 990,000 francs to invest, expecting to receive her returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she urgently needed the funds to support herself and her family. After negotiating, Jean-Claude invited the woman to dinner with a well-known politician, which sparked her interest in recovering her investment. On the agreed day, Jean-Claude picked her up in Paris, and they began their journey. However, as night fell, they found themselves lost on the road. Jean-Claude suddenly stopped the car and attacked the woman with tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to subdue her. Despite being caught off guard, the woman fought back fiercely and managed to escape the vehicle. Jean-Claude chased after her but stopped when she begged for mercy. After his plan failed, Jean-Claude begged for forgiveness and used a familiar excuse with the woman, claiming that his lymphoma was acting up, causing his erratic behavior. The woman agreed not to talk about the incident. As the police looked into Jean-Claude, they began to see him as a con man and a manipulator. When Jean-Claude awoke from his coma, he was immediately approached by the police, who wanted him to confess, but Jean-Claude chose to remain silent. With a blank expression, he stared into space, reluctant to speak when the police asked him about the events of January 9th, the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, Florence's serious injuries, and the discovery of his dead parents. Despite repeated questioning, Jean-Claude revealed nothing. The truth about Jean-Claude's life was finally revealed to the police. That's when he decided to break his silence. The reasons for this sudden change are still unclear, but it marked the beginning of him speaking out. On the evening of January 9th, Jean-Claude and his wife Florence spent a typical night at home. After putting their children to bed, they went to their bedroom. However, Jean-Claude's memories of that night are unclear until he recalls a disturbing scene, finding his wife lying in a pool of blood on their bed, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Confused about what had happened, Jean-Claude claims he didn't remember if an argument had occurred. He then went to sleep beside his wife's body. The next morning, he woke up and prepared breakfast for their children, Caroline and Antoine. He served them cereal and joined them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother, Jean-Claude told them she was unwell and needed to rest. After breakfast, Jean-Claude urged Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Jean-Claude then took out a .22 caliber rifle, equipped with a silencer, and shot his 7-year-old daughter Caroline in the back of the head, killing her. His son Antoine also met a similar tragic end. After the shootings, Jean-Claude left the house and went about his daily routine, appearing normal to those around him. He bought newspapers and watched television at home. However, Jean-Claude received a phone call from his parents inviting him to lunch, which he accepted. Jean-Claude drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. After lunch, Jean-Claude asked his father to go upstairs with him, saying Jean-Claude needed help with a faulty boiler pipe. Jean-Claude's elderly father checked the pipe at Jean-Claude's request. However, Jean-Claude shot his father in the back. He then went downstairs to his mother and shot her. Before leaving, Jean-Claude also shot the family dog. During the trial, when questioned about this, Jean-Claude showed a hint of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears, explaining that the dog was cherished by his children and reminded him of Caroline. This moment led Jean-Claude to decide to return home and take his own life. But his plan did not go as intended. Jean-Claude's former lover gave him 990,000 francs for an investment scheme, which he used to support himself. Jean-Claude told many people, including Florence's relatives and family, about the high returns from his investments, and they trusted him because they knew him. Jean-Claude gradually amassed a large sum of money from those who trusted him. To avoid detection by the tax authorities and others, Jean-Claude transferred the money to accounts in his own name in Geneva. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude managed the family finances, keeping his fraudulent activities a secret from Florence. Eventually, the inevitable happened, and it was time for Jean-Claude to face the consequences of his actions. As expected, those who had invested with Jean-Claude began to demand their money back, along with the promised returns. Despite having amassed over 2 million francs, Jean-Claude spent it all as soon as he had it to cover immediate expenses, leaving Jean-Claude with little to no savings. The inevitable day came when Jean-Claude had to confess the truth to Florence and the others who had entrusted him with money. Jean-Claude could no longer maintain the lie he had created. Feeling trapped and overwhelmed, he believes that ending his family's lives is a way to protect them from the consequences of his fraud. Jean-Claude then plans to commit suicide to avoid facing the reality of his situation. On June 23, 1996, Jean-Claude's trial began. Throughout the trial, Jean-Claude remained largely silent, sitting behind a glass partition with police on either side. On July 2, the court delivered its verdict. Jean-Claude was found guilty of murdering his wife, children, and parents. He was given a life sentence with no chance of parole for 22 years. After serving time in prison, Jean-Claude claimed to have become a devout Christian and expressed remorse for his actions. In 2019, Jean-Claude requested to be released from prison to live in a convent, where he could spend the rest of his life in repentance. The judge agreed to Jean-Claude's request. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shenynthia Gardner. Shenynthia Gardner was born in the late 1980s in Memphis, Tennessee. Not much is known about her early life. She is the daughter of Eleanor Snodgrass from Madison, Alabama. Shenynthia was a slim, beautiful brunette with curly hair as a child. Shenynthia was a multi-talented person. Her creative spirit was evident in her songwriting abilities, which helped her become a local celebrity. Shenynthia also has a keen eye for fashion and photography, attends church regularly, and spends time with her family. Shenynthia seems well-rounded and full of promise for a bright future. Shenynthia met Daryl Clayton when she was 14 years old. They became close friends. As they grew up and graduated from high school, their friendship turned into love. Shenynthia and Daryl often spent time together. In 2008, Daryl was accused of assaulting a woman, albeit unintentionally, which led to charges being filed against him. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. Shenynthia and Daryl did not get married, but they decided to live together as a couple. In 2008, they had a son named Kason. Shenynthia took on a motherly role, not only to her own son but also to Daryl's 2 children from a previous relationship. Shenynthia was a devoted mother and caring partner, which made her special to those around her. Although Shenynthia's relationship with Daryl did not last long, to Daryl, Shenynthia remained a loving wife and mother. Her life took a new turn when Shenynthia married Martin Gardner, the man who brought her joy and gave her a stable life. Shenynthia won Martin over with her kindness, love for children, and gentle nature. Their relationship developed quickly, and in September 2013, they decided to start a life together, moving into an apartment complex in southeast Shelby County. Their wedding marked the beginning. Shenynthia and her husband Martin started their family with the arrival of their first child, baby Talon Gardner. Their family grew as little Saya Gardner was born in 2014, followed by two more girls, Savi and Yahtzee. Martin and Shanynthia had 4 children together, in addition to a child from her previous relationship, creating a busy and happy home. Shanynthia prioritizes her family's health and also enjoys her part-time job at the Children's Hospital. Additionally, she supports a charity center that focuses on raising funds to support children. Her compassionate nature fuels her passion to dedicate her life to helping others. On July 1, 2016, Martin had a phone conversation with Shanynthia around noon as she was getting ready to watch a movie with their children. The couple were chatting quietly. Shanynthia suddenly lost control and grabbed a kitchen knife. She walked into the living room, where she brutally attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yahtzee, without any apparent reason or provocation. The innocent child, unable to defend herself, was tragically killed at the hands of her mother. The eldest child, a 7-year-old boy named Kason, witnessed the horrific scene. Too young to understand the situation, the boy ran away from home. Shanynthia, still armed with the knife, pursued her son out of the house, intent on continuing her violent rampage. The boy's terrified screams caught the attention of nearby neighbors. Realizing that the neighbor had seen Kason, Shanynthia immediately stopped. She returned to the house where Savi and Talon were lying. Upon entering the house, Shanynthia rushed to the bedroom where her young children were lying and rushed to kill them. Neighbors who witnessed the horrific scene quickly contacted the police for assistance, pleading for help in rescuing Kason and his siblings. The police arrived at Shaninthia's home. They found Shanynthia covered in blood, along with her 4 dead children. The scene shocked everyone. Shanynthia, still holding her cell phone in her hand, calmly called her husband Martin and confessed to killing the children. By the time the police arrived, the incident was over, and an eerie silence had fallen over the once happy home of the Shanynthia family. The house was now a scene of horror, with blood stains in every corner. A bloody knife, recovered by the police. When clergy and police arrived to assist, they were confronted with a horrifying reality. The police began gathering information and conducting an investigation. Shanynthia was held without bail and her trial is scheduled for July 5. Michelle Jaiman, Shaninthia's co-worker, defended Shanynthia on social media. Michelle highlighted the possibility of Shanynthia suffering from postpartum depression. Cases like Shaninthia's have sparked discussions about mental illness and such tragic events. Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, confirmed that mothers killing their children is extremely rare and is usually related to underlying mental health issues. Dr. Diane Barnes, an expert in psychology and postpartum health, made a crucial distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. According to her, these are 2 distinct conditions with unique symptoms. Dr. Diane cast doubt on the idea that Shanynthia Gardner was suffering from postpartum depression at the time of her actions. Craig Morton was appointed as Shaninthia's defense attorney. During the July 5, 2016 court hearing, Shanynthia participated via video link, but remained completely silent, not answering any questions from Judge L. Lambert. After the trial, Shanynthia was admitted to a mental health institute. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols were preparing to file a warrant for evidence gathered in the case. In January 2017, Shanynthia faced formal charges on 4 counts, 2 counts of child abuse, 1 count of aggravated murder, and 1 count of child neglect. Her mother, Sonia, was shocked and confused when she learned about the horrific incident and immediately rushed to the scene to find her grandson. Initially, Sonia suspected that Shanynthia and Martin were divorcing, and the prospect of raising 5 children alone may have driven Shanynthia to make the desperate decision. Shaninthia's ex-husband, Kason's father, said, although he was not his son's guardian after the relationship ended, he was still able to visit Kason whenever he wanted. However, the last time he saw his son was in November 2014. He noticed that Shaninthia's behavior was becoming more and more extreme. Every time he tried to contact Kason, he was unsuccessful. Those close to Shanинthia observed a change in her. She began to feel irritable, which gradually turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became erratic and unpredictable, leading many to suspect that she might be suffering from postpartum depression. This change shocked those around her, as Shanинthia had previously been a kind person, and the sudden change in her behavior left many wondering what had led to this tragic situation. The first signs of unusual behavior began in March 2015. Shanинthia Gardner left work and picked up her 5 children. She then drove away from her Memphis home, down an unfamiliar road. Her husband, Martin Gardner, initially thought she had gone for a walk in a nearby park to clear her head. However, as hours passed and Shanинthia did not return home, Martin became concerned and decided to report her missing to the police. He put out an alert for her car, which contained her and their 5 children. Unknown to Martin, Shanинthia had driven more than 74 miles east to Corinth, a place where she had no relatives. She was eventually found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, although the circumstances surrounding her arrival remain unclear. Upon examination, medical staff discovered shallow cuts to Shaninthia's neck and one wrist. It appeared she had attempted to harm herself, leaving many questions unanswered for her young children, who were too young to fully understand the situation. Following her return home, Shaninthia's behavior became increasingly strange. She claimed that someone was threatening her and her family, but she provided no details about the identity of the person or their motives. Martin was shocked, as there had been no previous threats or incidents. Additionally, Shanинthia began expressing dissatisfaction with her job and workload when around family and friends, stating that she felt terrible about it. She eventually started claiming that some of her co-workers were out to harm her. Despite these erratic claims, Shanинthia did not display any signs of violent or abusive behavior towards her children or others. Shanинthia Gardner's trial begins in 2021. Her defense team is focusing on her mental illness. The judge, James of the Shelby County Criminal Court, rejected the defense's argument, and in December 2021, Shanинthia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. Shanинthia Gardner, then 34, was sentenced in February 2022. She received a life sentence for each murder charge and 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Due to Tennessee's laws, Shanинthia Gardner will be eligible for parole after serving a total of 51 years in prison. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed his agreement with the decision, stating that it aligned with his goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shanинthia would no longer be able to harm any children. A vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, law enforcement officers, and others. Sonia, the grandmother of one of the victims, was among those in attendance. The group lit red and white candles and prayed for the victims. Following the loss, Martin's colleagues set up a social media account to help him prepare for the funeral of his 4 children. During the service, Martin gave an emotional final speech, recalling his home as a place filled with happiness when his children and Shanинthia were present, and expressing his intention to keep that memory alive. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20th, 1986 in Upland, California. Michelle was the eldest daughter of her parents who were business owners. She grew up with a sister who's 3 years younger than her. Michelle was raised in a strict conservative home and shared a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, she had a pretty normal life. During her time at school and college, her friends knew her as a polite and kind person. Michelle was known for speaking her mind and addressing conflicts directly. Since childhood, she had been diligent in completing tasks, a trait that continued throughout her high school years. In high school, Michelle was in a long-term relationship with a single person whose identity remains unknown. The relationship led to marriage in 2008, but 4 years later, the marriage began to unravel. They decided to separate, which left Michelle heartbroken and questioning her ability to find love again. However, in 2013, she met Ian Diaz, a man she met through a dating site. Ian, who was working as a deputy U.S. Marshal at the time, was attentive and loving, drawing Michelle in. They eventually moved in together in the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they set a wedding date. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect, but over time, Ian's behavior changed dramatically. Michelle had always seen Ian as a kind and attentive partner, but he slowly became loathing and abusive. At first, Michelle struggled to recognize these changes, mistaking them for acts of love. Ian began making requests that made Michelle uncomfortable, such as asking her to wear more revealing clothes. Despite her conservative upbringing, Michelle complied with his demands. Too easily, Ian made increasingly provocative demands. He asked her to get her navel pierced, and she finally agreed. Ian's requests became more bizarre and controlling. He asked Michelle to quit her job at a marketing firm, which she loved, and take a job at Disneyland, a place he had worked at before becoming a deputy U.S. Marshal. Ian claimed he wanted Michelle to be in a safer environment, but in reality, he wanted to keep a close eye on her every move, using his connections at Disneyland to monitor her activities. Michelle was initially taken aback by her husband's unusual request, but she wanted to make him happy, so she agreed to go along with it. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the situation and realized she was changing into someone she wasn't. She thought about discussing her concerns with her husband, but when she tried to talk to him, he became defensive and abusive. Around this time, Michelle and her husband, Ian, decided to buy a condo together. They thought owning a place would strengthen their relationship. This was about 2 years after they met in 2015. After searching, they found a condo in downtown Anaheim that they loved, but it was a bit pricey at $470,000. Although it was a stretch for their budget, they wanted the condo. What Michelle didn't know at the time was that Ian had no intention of contributing to the mortgage payments. Michelle and Ian had been experiencing relationship problems, but things took a turn for the worse when they bought a condo together. Ian claimed he was having financial difficulties and couldn't contribute to the down payment, which was $144,000 in cash. Michelle paid the entire amount and also made the mortgage payments, despite both their names being on the deed. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, and one incident turned violent, with Ian raising his hand to Michelle, causing her slight injuries. She drafted an email to her sister about the abuse but never sent it. By the summer of 2015, Michelle decided to leave the condo and move in with her parents. However, she was still responsible for paying the mortgage, which Ian continued to neglect. This enraged Michelle, especially since she had left her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland for less pay. When Michelle tried to contact Ian about the missed mortgage payments, he ignored her emails, calls, and texts. This lack of response pushed Michelle to her limit, and she decided to confront Ian directly. Ian revealed that he had no intention of paying the mortgage on the condo he shared with Michelle. This admission enraged Michelle, who was already struggling with the situation. She sent Ian a strongly worded email, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences. Ian responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle, but the police did not fully support his claim, as he was also at fault. When Michelle discovered Ian's restraining order request, she countered with evidence that he had never paid the mortgage on their jointly owned condo. They eventually agreed to hire property lawyers to resolve the issue. The court ultimately ruled in Michelle's favor, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance and imposing an additional penalty if he failed to comply. Ian was upset by the judgment but was forced to abide by the court's decision. The dispute took a year to resolve, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had separated for good. Michelle was finally free from the toxic relationship, while Ian was left. He was still living in the condo and paying the mortgage, which had taken a significant toll on him. In an effort to move on, Ian started using dating apps again, which is how he met Angela Connell. Although little is known about Angela, it is known that she was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona, attended a Catholic high school, and graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016, and their connection was immediate. Within a month, Ian proposed, and Angela moved into his condo. Everything seemed perfect for they. By May 2016, Angela was pregnant with twins, and Ian was overjoyed. However, their happiness was short-lived. Angela received an anonymous email that read, "You're not the right person for Ian." The message shook Angela, and she couldn't help but think of her ex, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before meeting Ian. But there was one problem: Angela had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so it seemed impossible for him to know about her new relationship with Ian. The email's origin and intentions remained a mystery. Ian and Angela were still living in the condo that Michelle had purchased. One day, Ian brought up the topic of the condo in a conversation with Angela, and she suddenly realized that Michelle might be the one who had sent her an anonymous email. Shortly after, Angela started receiving more emails from 6 different accounts, all with the same message but worded differently. Curious about the sender's identity, Angela replied to one of the emails and asked who was behind them. To her surprise, the response claimed to be from Michelle. Angela told Michelle to stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The next few emails Angela received made her feel threatened and worried for her safety. Fearing for her life, Angela decided to take action and filed a restraining order against Michelle on June 1, 2016. In her statement to the police, Angela explained that Michelle's emails had filled her with fear and anxiety. She was afraid to leave her home because of the threats and was worried that she might be attacked and killed if she stepped outside. The court took Angela's concerns seriously and immediately granted the restraining order against Michelle. In June 2016, Michelle appeared to have moved on from her past relationship. One evening, she met a friend and was returning home when she was met by a team of police officers in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding the restraining order. During the interrogation, Michelle was questioned about her connection to Angela and the threatening emails sent from her email address. Michelle claimed she had never heard of Angela and was unaware of the emails. She also stated that she believed she was being set up, as she had recently received alerts from Google and Microsoft indicating that her email address had been compromised. Specifically, her email address had been shut down, and she had been notified that it was being used as a recovery email for multiple unknown email accounts. Michelle suspected that her ex-husband might be impersonating her and had reported her concerns to the Anaheim Police Department. However, the police officers did not take her claims seriously. Despite Michelle's denials, she was served with a restraining order. Unbeknownst to Michelle, this was only the beginning of a more complex situation. Shortly after, Angela started receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she had not posted. The ad contained details soliciting a sexual coercion fantasy, which shocked Angela. She realized that someone must have created an account in her name, as the emails contained her exact personal details, including her phone number, condo address, and the breed of her dog. The only people who knew her condo's exact address were Ian and Michelle. Angela's fear resurfaced as she pondered the idea that the Craigslist ad might not have been Ian's doing. She became terrified, unwilling to leave her house, knowing that the perpetrator was aware of her address. The feeling of being constantly watched and not knowing who was responsible made her extremely uneasy. Days after the incident, on June 24, 2016, Angela was attacked. She was left with a bruised neck, ripped clothes, and a head injury from being slammed against the wall. Despite her condition, Angela managed to call 911. When the police asked if she recognized her attacker, Angela identified the person as Michelle. The police decided to take a stronger approach with Michelle and arrested her, as they believed a restraining order was not enough to prevent her from harming Angela. While in jail, Michelle managed to inform her parents about her arrest. Her parents, who were from a conservative background and were successful business owners, took immediate action to handle the situation. Michelle's bail was set at $10,000, which her parents were able to pay, securing her release. After Michelle's release, Angela began receiving harassing emails again. Although it seemed unlikely, the emails were actually sent from Michelle's personal email address. This raised questions about Michelle's involvement in the harassment. In another incident on July 13th, Angela contacted 911 after seeing a man standing outside her condo. When the police arrived, the stranger claimed to be responding to a sexually explicit Craigslist ad posted in Angela's name. The police investigated the origin of the ad and found that it led back to Michelle. This discovery raised more questions. Was Michelle lying to the police, or was someone else using her name to post the ad? The day after Michelle's second arrest on July 14th, the police set her bail at a staggering $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the threatening emails and creating the Craigslist ads, and her parents believed her, knowing she wasn't capable of such behavior. They decided to hire a lawyer, suspecting that whoever was behind the threats could continue to have Michelle arrested. During Michelle's second stint in jail, the threats and emails targeting Angela stopped again. 3 months passed, and it seemed like the situation had finally calmed down for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were working tirelessly to uncover the identity of the person impersonating their daughter. To get to the bottom of the mystery, they needed to find out who had access to Michelle's records. After gathering data from her school, hospital, and other records, they discovered crucial evidence. It turned out that Michelle had been hospitalized in June, on the same day the first emails were sent. This revelation made it clear that Michelle couldn't have sent those emails herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received information that led them to believe their daughter was innocent. Michelle's father took matters into his own hands and downloaded software to track the IP addresses of the threatening emails, which were encrypted and difficult to trace. On September 30, 2016, Ian appeared at the police station and presented the bail, securing Michelle's release. Michelle and her family were shocked and confused by Ian's actions, and they couldn't understand why he would bail her out after treating her poorly in the past. They wondered if Ian had suddenly developed a conscience or if there was more to the story. After Michelle's release, Ian revealed a shocking truth. He claimed that Angela had framed Michelle for sending the threatening emails. According to Ian, Angela had created proxy email addresses in Michelle's name and used them to send threatening emails to herself. This revelation raised more questions than answers, and Michelle and her family were left to wonder why Angela would do such a thing. Angela went so far as to post Craigslist ads pretending to be Michelle. These ads included personal details that only Ian and Angela would know. Further, Angela inflicted bruises on herself in June 2016, claiming someone had attacked her in her garage. However, Ian later found CCTV footage revealing the truth. Angela had self-inflicted the injuries. Ian discovered a history of Angela fabricating stories and making things up from the start of their relationship. Angela's deceit went so far as faking her pregnancy. She had even purchased a sonogram photo and positive pregnancy test. Ian investigated further to determine the root cause of Angela's obsessive and hurtful actions against Michelle. Angela became aware of Michelle after meeting Ian in 2015, where Michelle and Ian came up frequently. As a result, Angela developed curiosity and eventually resentment toward Michelle after looking into Michelle's personal background, including the affluent community from which she hailed. Angela's discovery led her to view Michelle as a lucrative target. Meanwhile, Ian, Michelle's husband, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Michelle due to a past condo dispute. The incident had left Ian fuming, particularly because he was forced to pay the mortgage after Michelle's countersuit. Seeking revenge, Ian and Angela formed an alliance to bring Michelle down. Ian provided Angela with Michelle's email address, and they began secretly plotting to frame Michelle and have her arrested. To conceal their scheme, they created multiple email addresses to communicate with each other. Using virtual private networks, VPNs, they created 6 fake accounts in Michelle's name. Unbeknownst to Michelle, these accounts were the source of the Google alerts she had reported to the police, which were actually created by Angela. When Michelle obtained a restraining order, Angela was dissatisfied, as her goal was to completely eliminate Michelle. In response, Angela devised a more elaborate plan. She created a fake Craigslist profile using Michelle's identity and posted an ad inviting men to her home for a sexual coercion fantasy. However, the inconsistencies in their plan ultimately led Ian to confess, inadvertently framing his own wife in the process. He was seemingly oblivious to the extent Angela would go far once the truth was out. The police obtained a search warrant for all of Angela's devices, and what they found was astonishing. The investigation revealed that all of Ian's claims were true. They discovered 21 threatening emails, most of which were sent from Angela and Ian's condo. Further investigation into the origins of the emails supposedly sent to Angela revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was discovered that Angela had traveled to Arizona to visit her father during that time. The investigation into Angela's background began after these shocking discoveries. It was then that investigators found out that this was not the first time Angela had committed such an act. In 2013, Angela had committed similar crimes while dating Jason Rayburn, a state trooper from California. During their relationship, Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had been diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, as time passed, Jason became suspicious as Angela's claims did not add up. He started digging deeper and was shocked to discover that Angela had fabricated both her cancer diagnosis and her career. On January 6, 2019, nearly 3 years after the truth came to light, Angela was arrested and charged for her crimes. The Orange County District Attorney's Office worked to clear Michelle's name, and 3 days later, her record was officially cleared of the false charges of making a threat to life and assault. As a result of the ordeal, Michelle had to drop out of her MBA program and lost her job. However, now that her name has been cleared, she is rebuilding her life. She has since completed her MBA and found a job in field marketing for a cosmetics company. Michelle has also moved to New York to start fresh and be closer to her sister. In contrast, Angela pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including false imprisonment and perjury, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Ian, who was involved with Angela, has since separated from her and sold their condo for $500,000. In 2021, Ian faced multiple charges for allegedly masterminding a plot to frame Michelle. In addition to receiving a 5-year prison sentence, he was charged with 1 count each of perjury, cyberstalking, and conspiracy to commit cyberstalking. This raises questions about the thoroughness of the initial investigation. If the investigators and police officers had scrutinized the situation more closely, perhaps the plot would not have progressed as far as it did. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim, with an older brother named Josh. The siblings developed a strong bond as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family relocated from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was an active member of the school band and played the drums. Sarah was passionate about music, especially drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly played at jam sessions in Redding. As one of the few female drummers, she stood out on stage. When Sarah was 18, she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota with her mother and brother after her parents got divorced. There, she continued to play drums at different venues and eventually met Bernard Allison, a famous blues guitarist and singer. Allison was impressed with her skills and invited her to join him on stage occasionally. By the time Sarah turned 19, she had become a local celebrity among blues fans, known for her bright smile, which earned her the nickname Ronald McDonald. Meanwhile, her brother Josh was struggling with depression and mental health issues after their parents' divorce. Tragically, on an ordinary day in February 2016, the police arrived at their doorstep and delivered devastating news to Sarah's mother. Josh took his own life at the age of 20, leaving his loved ones, especially his mother Sarah, heartbroken. The bond between Sarah and Josh was incredibly strong, and his passing devastated her. To cope with her loss and to help others who struggle with mental health, Sarah decided to study psychology. She had been in touch with Nico Carson Major, who lived in the Netherlands, and she moved there to pursue her studies. At Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Sarah began her psychology program with Nico's support, who not only helped her navigate her grief but also assisted her with her studies as a native speaker. Sarah's passion for music never faded despite her focus on studies and work. She stayed in touch with Bernard Allison, a musician she had performed with, and shared her dream of buying a drum kit. In January 2017, Bernard's band toured Europe, and on Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended Bernard's concert in Germany with Nico. Bernard spotted her in the audience, invited her on stage, and let her play the drums with them, just like old times. Sarah lived on the third floor of an apartment complex near the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she planned to spend Christmas in the United States and booked a flight for a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, her life took a devastating turn. When a police officer appeared at her doorstep, just like in 2016 when her son had passed away, Sarah's legs began to shake. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, but couldn't bear the thought of losing another loved one. When the officer informed Sarah's mother that her daughter had passed away, she was overcome with grief and lost consciousness. This devastating news came just a year after the loss of her son, who had died at the age of 20. Sarah was only 21 years old. Sarah lived in a student complex on the third floor, where she rented an apartment with her roommate, Joel Schelling. Joel was also a musician, and music was the common interest that brought them together. Unlike Sarah, who was outgoing and always smiling, Joel was more reserved and had a temper. Despite their occasional quarrels, Sarah remained a supportive friend to Joel, often calming him down when he became angry. However, the situation took a turn for the worse over time. Just 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor that she was afraid of Joel, who had threatened to harm 3 people he disliked. Sarah knew she had to go to the police. Just a couple of days before her death, she had spoken to her mother on the phone about her concerns. Sarah's roommate, Joel, was behaving in a way that was increasingly bothering her. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live as soon as possible and to avoid Joel until she could move out. On December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., the police received a call from Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors, who reported hearing a loud fight and then Sarah screaming. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah died from her injuries. The police immediately began searching for Joel, who was nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported that he had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a large double bass with him. This distinctive instrument became a key detail in the police's description of Joel. Less than 2 hours after the crime, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. He was on his way to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. After Joel was arrested, he made a shocking confession to his mother while on the train. He told her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge subsequently placed Joel under arrest for 14 days to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducting the autopsy on Sarah's body found 27 stab wounds, with several of them on her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah passed away, her mother, Doni Odegaard, traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned home. However, this required raising $40,000, a task that was made possible by the generosity of strangers who cared for the family. Upon learning of Joel's arrest, Doni Odegaard inquired if her daughter had contacted the police. Sarah had instead reached out to social workers, who visited Joel and found him calm. However, the next day, Sarah again contacted social services due to Joel's erratic behavior, including hitting himself with a hammer and threatening to harm multiple people. The case against Schelling began in March 2019. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Pappenheim's death and admitted his guilt. However, he claimed he did not remember the actual act of taking her life. According to Schelling, he recalled fighting with Sarah, but his next memory was of being in the shower, cleaning himself. Sarah's mother, Doni Odegaard, attended each hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. However, when asked if these voices had instructed him to fight with Sarah, Schelling said he did not know and could not recall. He also could not remember the cause of their fight. Prior to the verdict, experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple disorders and required long-term treatment. Despite this, they concluded that Schelling was responsible for Sarah's death. The verdict was announced in December 2019. Sarah Pappenheim's death occurred before she could receive a response to her second request for support, after her initial request for assistance from social workers went unresponded due to the specialist's unavailability. The medics concluded that Schelling was aware of the initial fight and scuffle with Sarah and had the opportunity to either stop the altercation or grab the knife. By choosing the latter, he should be held accountable for his actions. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence, but the judge in Rotterdam gave Schelling a 6-year prison term, followed by an indefinite sentence in a psychiatric hospital. The court reduced the sentence from 10 years due to Schelling's relatively young age and his significantly diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime. This means that the court did not consider Schelling fully responsible for his actions. When handing down the sentence, the court released a detailed explanation stating that, although the crime was severe and unpredictable, Schelling's serious psychological disorders made it likely that he would commit another violent crime. The court noted that Schelling suffers from chronic psychological disorders that require ongoing treatment in a clinical setting. The court viewed psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has expressed a willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. The court has ruled that Schelling will remain in treatment until it determines he is well enough to be released. The court will review his status every 2 years. Additionally, Schelling has been ordered to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard is outraged by the sentence, believing it is too lenient. She thinks Schelling should have received a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. In her opinion, Schelling would have faced a much harsher sentence in the US, such as life imprisonment or the death penalty, which would have prevented him from committing a similar crime in the future. She is also concerned that Schelling may be eligible for parole in as little as 4 years and vowed to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers who had interacted with Sarah. The investigation concluded that the social workers could not be held accountable for failing to identify Schelling's disorders because they did not possess the necessary expertise to make such a diagnosis.